everybody, and thank you for joining me today. It's Allan Laboucan with the Rocks and Stocks News website. We've got another of our series that we talk to CEOs of junior mining companies when they put out good results. Earlier today, Endurance Gold had an excellent news release that they expanded their Eagle Zone with 8.62 grams per ton of gold over 24 meters. So a nice thick intersection, and that's estimated to be the true width. It also had a subinterval of 17 grams over 4.3 meters. So it certainly looks like they're onto something here. And that's why I got Robert Boyd, who is the CEO of the company, on the horn. And he's been kind enough to join us. Thank you very much for joining us today, Robert.
Well, my pleasure, Alan. It's a pleasure to get back to talking to you after many years.
Yes, it has been. We've known each other since the diamond days, and I'm a believer, Robert, that a lot of the best people in the business have experience in diamonds simply because those little buggers are hard to find. And are you enjoying gold exploration a little more than remote diamond exploration?
Well, the one thing about diamond exploration, and I don't want to dwell on this too long because I want to talk about endurance, but diamond exploration really requires a whole broad range of geological and statistical skills. It's very difficult. You really need experts in the business to do diamond exploration. But my background is gold exploration. I started my career working for Homestake for about 10 years, running Canadian exploration activities for them at the end, until we merged with Corona at the time, and then ultimately Homestake and Corona, that combination became part of Barrick. So I have quite a bit of history in the gold business, so I know what I'm doing. And in fact, I looked at this property that we have in Endurance Gold in 1987 as part of some of the evaluation work I was doing for Homestake at the time. But the gentleman that owned this property, he made his discovery by dowsing, which is essentially the same kind of methodology used for looking for water. And to give him credit, he had success and found the initial zone on the property called the Imperial Zone. And that Imperial Zone, unfortunately, he continued to focus all his energy on that one zone, and majority of the drilling that he did in about a 3 or 4 year period was just within about 100 meters of that initial discovery. Unfortunately, that company got reorganized. He passed away, and a lot of the data was lost. The core was vandalized and destroyed. And so we've had to sort of go back and start from scratch. We acquired the property actually from 2 industry professionals that acquired the claims when the Crown grants came open. With all the reorganization of the prior company, the ground came open, and we acquired it from those industry professionals that staked the claim. And so we went back and did systematic work because of the nature of exploration that was done on it before. There was no systematic work, no soil sampling for gold, no ground geophysics, no airborne geophysics.
That kind of shocked me, Robert, because for a couple of reasons. You're in areas where there's been some known mining. And secondly, logistically, you've got roads going right up to your property.
That's right. And we are 10 kilometers from the Braylorn Pioneer Mining Complex, which has produced over 4 million ounces of gold at plus 17 grams per ton between the 1930s and the 1970s. And it still remains the largest gold producer in the province of British Columbia. So we're in a very productive camp, and we're not on the same structure as Braylorn, but we look like we're on some sort of parallel structure. And the most interesting thing about the Reliance project is it looks like it's a higher level orogenic gold system. Like orogenic gold systems are the types of deposits that can continue to go at depth. and they can have several levels of exposure when they're found. The Archean gold deposits are typically deeper ones, or mid-level type systems. But when you get into the younger systems, like in Newfoundland and here in British Columbia, the younger orogenic systems, you can sometimes have the higher levels preserved in what are called the epizonal equivalent of an orogenic gold system. And what distinguishes them is they're often in a brittle deformation domain. So they'll have breccias associated with them, stockworks. They won't be simple crack and seal veins. And the other thing is they often have an association of antimony with them.
And you can see that brecciation in your core.
Absolutely. So so you're not looking at the crack and seal veins like you had at Braylorn, but you're looking at a much higher level system where it expressed itself in very wide alteration, like hundreds of meters wide when I talk about wide alteration. And brecciation zones within that that carry the gold in sulfidized country rock. So you don't actually see a lot of, on surface, you don't really see a lot of silicification associated with the mineralization. It is there, but it's subtle and more stockwork and pervasive kind of silicification rather than veins. But when we get into the better zones, you can sometimes have these breccias that do look like they're healed with some fine-grained quartz. But it's not epithermal. It's definitely orogenic quartz type systems.
That's pretty exciting because there's some pretty sweet orogenic gold deposits out there that make for high margin mines. And just to get it a little off the geological side so more people can understand that these there's fault control. They have deep structures that go way down that open things up. And what's exciting about this project is that large oxidized zone. It kind of is an indicator that you've got quite a powerful system there. Am I getting that right, Robert?
Yeah, well, orogenic gold systems occur in compressional regimes, and to simplify that, it's basically where continents collide or areas. So you have these big structural regimes. So you have a lot of fantastic ground preparation, and that ground preparation goes right down deep, deep, deep. And so the other thing about these gold systems is that when you get gold in those systems, in orogenic gold systems, if you find the gold near surface, you can typically follow them down in chutes and plunges and significant exploration at depth. For instance, at Braylorn, it's still at the mid-level of the system, so it's probably exposed maybe 5 kilometers or 4 kilometers below where it was deposited. But they've followed that. Braylorn has been followed down to, I think the deepest they mined it might be down to 1,000 meters below surface.
And you're finding the high grade right at surface.
Absolutely, yeah. And the story on this is that the gentleman that owned and controlled the project before used to run around with a bulldozer to do his prospecting as well as that dowsing. And he was looking for veins, the traditional sort of looking for more of the Braylorn crack and seal veins with visible gold. Didn't find much visually, but when we optioned the property, we went up and cleared out these trails which were overgrown. And once we started looking at the outcrops in the upper banks of these trails he put in, we noticed there's really strong alteration, some that looked like it was alteration of sulfides, not just iron carbonate alteration. And so we just said, let's just channel sample. Let's just do the systematic work and channel sample all these outcrops. So it was a lot of work to clean them off and channel samples across those. And we found outcrop zones there that we had about, I think one of them was about 5.8 grams over 31 meters of channel sampling. Another one that was just up the hill from that, there was 24.5 meters of 4.88 grams per ton. So these were zones that were sticking out on surface, but were never recognized. But they were quite oxidized and punky rock. It was hard to recognize, well, where's, what's hosting the gold here, right? And so we because of that oxidation, we decided to do an RC drilling program first to find the dimensions and understand the system and which way the mineralization was going. And the RC is a dry technique that recovers 100% of the rock. Whereas the diamond drilling, if we tried to diamond drill these zones, which we have now duplicated some of the RC holes with diamond drill, and the core recovery through this oxidized material can sometimes drop down to 60 or 70% recovery. So so we did duplicate when we stepped in and started doing our diamond drilling program in August. We did duplicate some of the initial RC holes to prove that they were real in terms of grade over width. And then we started stepping out into the unoxidized portion. And this hole that we reported today of 8.62 grams per ton over 24.4 meters was only intersected about 26 meters, I think it was, what do we have, 25.6 meters down hole. And that intersection was the first intersection that we recovered with diamond drilling in the unoxidized portion. And the mineralization consists of a wide zone of this 24 meters, multiple breccia. It's essentially a brecciated zone over that interval with probably some really big fragments in there. And we've put in our press release, we put a photo of some of the core in the core box, and you can see it's pretty consistently mineralized over that 24.4 meter interval.
Yeah, I saw that. And you can see it in the cross section and the distribution of the gold throughout the hole.
Yeah, that's right. And so that we now have an understanding that this system, although there's a lot of steep structures in the area, this Eagle gold zone system, it looks like it's got a shallower dip to it around minus 30 to 35 degrees dip, which is not dissimilar to what the dip slope is in the area, and was the reason for the confusion that we had in terms of all the different outcrops that we found that were mineralized, is because the cat trails kept in their cross-cutting their way up the hill, just kept hitting the same zone, but just dipping, because it's dipping fairly shallow along the dip slope, it was kept outcropping. So we understood, we figured out the dimensions with the RC drilling, and now we're trying to chase that with the diamond drilling at depth as it goes back into the hill to the southeast. This
I saw in your news release, you also had some cross sections and you had a couple sections in there as well. How far apart are those two sections?
I think those two sections are maybe about 35 meters apart. As you go south on the zone gets deeper away from surface. And so it probably plunges and strikes back into the hill to the southeast. So we're starting to pick it up now with this hole number 6, which is, hole number 6 that we reported in this press release. But we think we've picked up the zone 2 and holes 18 and 19, which we put on that section, but we don't have the assays for those holes yet. But it looks like it might pinch up dip a little bit in that area. But we're still intersecting it in holes 18 and 19. And so we really haven't opened the system up any further, which we need to do further to the southeast with drilling, except that there was no roads that existed or any historic trails to the southeast of this hole number 6. And so we had to put in some new trails, which we did in October. We completed those holes in October, and we're in there just drilling while we were completing those trails, started drilling on those trails in October. And we looked like we picked up the zone to the southeast up the hill now, but we don't have the assays for those yet. And we prospected up in the zone, and we looked like we picked up zones in outcrop up there. Strong alteration continues, and we picked up zones in outcrop up there too. So we weren't expecting that with the way the zone was dipping and striking. So we think we either have another zone or there's a fault offset of the zone or something in there. So we're still unraveling the story here. But
The
whatever
thing,
it is, we reported a really good drill intersection in December 9th at the Imperial Zone, which was the zone that was drilled previously. This drill intersection is about, I think now probably about 500 meters away from that intersection. This intersection was about 8.62 grams per ton over 24 meters. And the one that we had at Imperial was a similar grade and width, interestingly enough, and they're 500 meters apart. And we see some encouragement in holes to the southeast that we're anxious to see assay results for, because they could indicate the system gets even bigger to the southeast.
you know, what really impressed me when I was looking at the news, not just the grade, but if you look at the distribution of the gold throughout the hole, it's not really spiky. You're getting a nice thick intersection of consistent grade there.
That's right. When we're in the zone, we seem to be in the zone, and we often, where we're getting it, it's often in that 20 to 24 meter kind of width. Sometimes the grade drops off a bit. Like one of the holes here we reported was 2.49 or 2.39 grams per ton over 14.8 meters. But it's still there. The zone's there. And it's not unusual to see when you're in a gold zone for the grades to bounce around a bit like that.
Well, especially in those orogenic systems.
Yeah. And so we're really pleased with what we're seeing. And we've now demonstrated with a discovery we had at the Diplomat with that historic Imperial Zone. And this drilling we've done now and the stuff we've got on surface, that we're anxiously awaiting results from channel sampling the new, or not channel sampling, but just grab and chip sampling the new outcrops up to the southeast up the hill. That you know, we've demonstrated the zone now has got at least 1.5 kilometers of strike to it, and we're picking up gold intersections here at Eagle, Imperial, in the 24 meter kind of width with good grades and often higher grade cores in them.
So you've got the plumbing system, the crack in the earth that goes way down. You've got the broken up rock near surface. You're catching the high grade with your drill machine, the truth machine. And it suggests that not just what's in the drilling, but in the alteration and the oxidation, it suggests a very big, powerful system there.
Well, that's what we think. The strength of this system indicates that it's definitely going to be rooted in some way, and we're seeing two dominant structural directions at the Imperial Zone. It looks like it's a steeper feature, about dipping about minus 70 degrees to the southwest. I already mentioned this Eagle Zone is dipping about 30 degrees to the southwest. So it looks like you've got two structural sets that are going to be potentially gold mineralized, and they may be rhyodal, you know, a crack and seal, you know, these kind of rhyodal features where you have the zones open up based on stress fractures in a large structural setting. We need to understand that a bit better. But if you do, if this minus 30 degree system is one of those rhyodal sets, then they often occur like rungs on a ladder, right? Where you have the steep structures, and then between those steep structures, bounding structures are sub-horizontal or flat kind of crack zones that open up. And that's what we think we're seeing at the Eagle Zone, is one of these flatter rungs on a ladder, which opens up a lot of exploration potential, not only to follow the zones at depth on the steeper structures, but as you move down, you continue to find these additional rungs that open up and create opportunities for other mineralized zones. And so it's
at those kind of grades, you don't need, and thickness, you don't need a lot of a strike to start adding up a lot of ounces.
Yeah, and the Eagle Zone in particular, because of its dip and the dip slope in the area, it's sitting there just below surface, down 30, 40 meters below surface or at surface. And so we could identify an open pitable resource there as well that would have a pretty low strip ratio, that would be part oxide and part sulfide. So, there's still a lot of work to be done, but the key to opening this and turning it into our objective, which is a multi-million ounce gold system, just like Braylorn, but an epizonal equivalent, is to continue to explore and find the edges of this system and find these routing structures that are the feeders for these gold systems.
And then,
Because you may have the shallow rhytals in here, but the gold's coming from somewhere, so you've got to find those feeding structures, which will probably be the steeper
and
structure.
anywhere along that system, you can find jewelry boxes like at Fosterville's Swan Zone.
Exactly, and this has some strong analogies to Fosterville in the sense that it's a stibnite gold association in an epizonal type orogenic setting. So that there are analogies there. There's differences as well, but the key is that these kind of systems is that you have a feeding structure that we've now identified as gold bearing and has significant gold intervals over 1.5 kilometers. Now we have to do the systematic work of chasing those things at depth and doing a proper systematic drilling along that 1.5 kilometer structure to identify where the zones are and which ones, where the gold is in terms of the steeper structure, the shallower structure, and there may be other features in there as well.
Well, that's what you see at Fosterville as well. It's quite complex faulting. In this case, complex is good.
Yeah, in Fosterville, of course, it's got a long mining history in the shallow area to get a better understanding of a structural and environment. This is a brand new discovery, really, that never had any systematic work done on it. No petrographic work that we could identify, no studies done on the area. This project, there was a small vein that was worked on this property back in 1915 or so, and it shows up in the records, called the old Reliance working and another one called the Senator working. And they were just small adits that were put in chasing often the stibnites associated with narrow quartz veins that are a late pulse of the mineralizing feature. So some old workings chased some of these stibnite veins and recovered gold antimony ore that was shipped off back in 1915 or so. But to the best of our knowledge, the project had never been drilled till the prior owner picked it up in the late 80s and did that work I already talked about. So it's a new discovery in a camp, and the natural reaction is, well, how did this go overlooked? Because it's looking right down the Bridge River Valley. This was inundated with prospectors in the Fraser River Gold Rush that came in and found the initial gold up in this area that drained the Braylorn Pioneer Mine back in the 1860s, 1870s. The first hard rock claims in this district were staked in the 1890s. How was it overlooked? Well, one of the reasons it's a tough area to work because we're sitting in the ash shadow of Mount Meager, which blew up 2,400 years ago and dropped all this felsic or popcorn kind of ash on the property that covered everything up. And so a lot of this made it very difficult for prospectors to prospect.
Can't see it.
They had to dig their way through this ash to get down to the stuff where the gold would be underneath the ash.
Well, Robert, for me, I don't worry too much about why something wasn't found. I kind of focus on when I see the truth machine go in there and hit something. That's a lot more exciting to me than trying to answer the question, well, why did it go? Who cares? Now have it in the truth machine.
That's right. And it's definitely an interesting case history of, and I think it really opens up this camp for potential for doing other exploration, but it's tough. It's tough exploration, figuring out what to do in a new area in this camp with this thick ash that sits on top of everything. But we rose to those challenges and did the systematic work. In fact, we identified a technique that helped us look through that ash, and it was called biogeochem. We basically sampled the Douglas fir trees And there's lots of that. If your readers want to Google, just Google Douglas fir and arsenic, and you'll find that Douglas fir likes to soak up arsenic for some reason. And we have a strong arsenic association with our gold, just like Braylen does, and just like about every other orogenic gold system has arsenic associated with it. And so we just sampled for Douglas fir and found the zone in Douglas fir and on biogeochem anomaly, and that's when we decided to do the real tough work in that anomaly and dug down and got the soils below it, and that's what justified us putting in additional roads up the hill to follow the zone to the southeast.
Well, you don't have to convince me about that, because you know they use some of those techniques in diamonds as well.
Yeah, not as much in diamonds, but yeah, it's every area has its unique
Signature.
attributes, and biogeochem unfortunately might work in one project, but over in the next valley it won't work because you don't get the Douglas fir, or there's some different climate issue or elevation issue or something like that. So,
or forest fires or whatever.
yeah, so you've got to be flexible and understand, have the experience to look at the different techniques and recognize what will work for you and what won't. And that was a good benefit to us initially on our systematic work that we did in 2020.
So when did you get involved with this company and this project? Because I've seen I looked at your PowerPoint presentation, and it looks like, I don't know, maybe a year or so ago, there was a lot more systematic work getting done.
Yeah, well, we acquired the project in 2019, our initial letter agreement option, and then, but it didn't come with any data. So the deal we made with the vendors was a small payment, and then we did our research to see what we could find in the public record, or go to consultants and track down additional information. And then we made our decision to proceed with our option in January of 2020. So the first systematic work started in 2020.
Okay, that's when I started seeing all your list of work you've done.
Yeah, right. So that's really when the systematic work started, and I've been involved with Endurance Gold since 2007, and I'm one of 3 of the directors who collectively own about 55% of the shares of the company.
Wow.
So we have a very tight shareholding amongst us as directors, 2 large U.S. shareholders, and that serve on the board. And the company's been around since 2005, essentially as a prospect generator. And we generated a project in Wyoming, which we sold to GFG as part of their Rattlesnake Hills project. We sold another project after going to a minority joint venture interest. We sold that project in Ontario, which was a Witwatersrand type gold project that we had in Ontario. And then we still retain 100% in a really good project up in Alaska called the Elephant Mountain Project. And that's a reduced intrusive hosted type gold system in Alaska. And a rare earth project we've been sitting on for a number of years now in southeast the Yukon. And so,
well, I always like to see that large insider ownership. It shows that you guys like what you see, and that you're aligned with the shareholders.
Yeah. So during the tough time, we did, it meant us having to fund that to some degree by purchasing shares or taking shares for salary instead of salary and things like that. So it was. It's just part of our vested interest, and wanting to make sure we are aligned as shareholders, just with all the rest of our shareholders.
Okay, Robert, let's talk about what's pending as far as news, and then where to from here. So on the pending side of things, you have some more holes to report?
Yeah, we drilled in our diamond drill program, we drilled 22 holes, and we've now reported since late November, we've reported 10 of those holes. So we have another 12 holes to report. And those holes are dominated by remaining holes on this to the southeast extension of the Eagle Zone to the southeast. We have some surface sampling we collected up along that trend as well to see to benchmark whether there's gold on surface. And then we also have another, I think it's another 2 holes to report on the Imperial Zone. So all of that reporting will be done between now and probably the end of February, we expect, somewhere in that time.
And is that close to the time where you can get back in there and drill some more?
Yes, yeah, we expect to be back and drilling probably maybe late March, early April. That's our plan, is to be back with an early spring program. And
so by the time you get back all those results, you'll be able to model things up a little bit better and go in with much more targeted drilling. And let's talk a little bit about what you can see so far. I know you still have more work to do and more results to get.
Well, the drilling would be to follow up and find the edge of the system, both along trend and at depth. And so the goal is just to continue to explore, to open up this system and demonstrate that it's got the tonnage in multiple zones, right? Both at Imperial, Diplomat, and the Eagle Zone. And there's a fairly large unexplored area sort of between Eagle and Imperial that needs a lot more work done on it.
That's music to my ears. You know, Robert, I find a lot of times these days that everybody's in a rush to get to a resource. And I don't really understand until you get to the edges of the system and figure it out. What are you doing a resource for? One, it'll cap the project in the minds of investors. But secondly, how do you get ready to do a preliminary economic assessment if you don't know the parameters of what you're assessing?
Yeah, and you know, it's a project where you know, we've got enough encouragement here. These intersections, everything we're getting, as I mentioned, I think the majority of our holes that we did for RC, 41 of the 52 holes had gold intersections over 3-meter width in them. And we expect that our diamond drilling will also have a very high incidence of drill intersections as well. And I think I've provided guidance to expect that we should see the majority of our diamond drill holes have gold intersections in them. And so this is pretty good, right? You get those kind of statistics in an orogenic gold system, you need to continue to explore and understand the edges of the system. And we need to start drilling holes within the boundaries of those initial hits that we get to build the tonnage in there, but also to open up and find the edge of those zones, so we know where to guide and how many drills to put on this and what kind of programs require. So we would like to be at this doing a very big, we did about a 4,100 meter drill program between August and September, August and November this past diamond drilling program this past year. We would like to sort of ratchet that up to a much larger number, maybe 8,000 to 10,000 meters this coming year, if not more. So there's some logistics that go with that require permitting and bonding and things like that. So those are the kind of things that we have to start working on, dealing with right now. We also have, you know, I think something of interest to you, Allan, in particular, is the fact that we have a pretty good relationship with the communities, not only Goldbridge, which is the local community, but about 25% of the employment of our personnel on the project this past year has been from the community of Shalath, which is the Shala Development Corporation. And we've been really happy with that relationship. They provide well-trained and really good individuals that really complement our program, and they've been part of our program.
Being First Nations myself, and it often blows my mind, Robert, that I tell the story of my great grandfather who did a trap line for like 80 years. And if you ever went to him and said, have you ever seen rock like this? he would take you right to that rock. I think there's so much talent in the First Nations communities that aren't being utilized just as prospectors. You know,
Yeah,
you tell them what to look for and they'll go out there and find it. And that kind of exploration is very cheap compared to flying around with helicopters and, you know, doing that expensive work.
yeah. Well, I think, you know, this was this Ridge River Valley was quite a populated valley with the First Nations until they put the dam in the 1950s, and that everybody got moved out of the valley in the 1950s by BC Hydro at the time. But the people that were moved out of that valley moved into the community of Bridge River First Nation or the Shala First Nation. And so those have traditional history in this district. And in fact, I think the first gold in this district was identified by First Nations, and they brought the prospectors into this area in the Fraser Gold Rush. Were directed into this area based on traditional activities being done by the First Nations of panning for gold up there, I think. So,
Wow. Well, I encourage you and I hope you really do that community outreach and get some of those young kids out there and teach them what to look for, Robert. And I think it'll help everybody, not just your company, but their community as well.
Well, it goes both ways. They're teaching us things too about what to look for in terms of the fauna and everything in the area. So it goes both ways. So
you're putting a big smile on my face about that, Robert. I'm a big cheerleader.
Yeah, well, it's always I don't know if you're aware, Al, but I was on the board of directors of North American Metals that built the Golden Bear mine, and our partnership was with the First Nations up there to actually, I think we were the first to at the time to get a road built with First Nation contractors into the Golden Bear mine at the time, and so that was what I think one of the first in British Columbia in terms of First Nation partnerships. It wasn't, I can't take full credit for that, but it was totally supportive of it as with Homestake at the time as the big shareholder in North American Metals. We ultimately sold that, but it was a good learning experience, and we had a similar success when we were running our diamond program for Ashton in Quebec. We
The
started
Cree.
early days, 30% employment or so with Mistissini Cree, and they were the ones that, after a bit of training, those Cree prospectors are the ones that found most of our kimberlite boulders. So
Exactly. You know, well,
looking rock, right?
not only is there that potential, but I think if you, whenever I've done consulting to companies on these kind of issues, I've always recommended 3 pillars: respect, consultation, even before it's required, and inclusion. And if you operate with those, you're not going to have any problems.
Yeah. Yeah, it's and you know that's the great. It only makes sense. I mean, I serve on the board of PDAC and AMBC, and you know, we're great supporters of this. The First Nations are our partners, right? In terms of resource development, we in the exploration and mining business are probably the biggest employers of First Nation communities because we are working out in those hinterlands, and it just makes sense. It's good business.
Well, does my heart good, Robert. Not only do you have an exciting project, but I think you've got a great approach. And I'll be a big cheerleader of this going forward, Robert. So going forward, you'll be chasing along. You got a lot of room to chase a long strike and then to follow deeper. So you got a lot ahead of you.
Yeah, we do, and we've got parallel structures on the property as well. But you know, we've got a pretty interesting project here with a very strong alteration on this royal shear structure where we're focusing our energy right now. So it's going to be their priority to build that out with drill holes and do that over this coming year. But we'll also try to tap into understanding the potential of some of our other parallel structures and even further along structural trends and stuff.
Well, you've got the cracks in the rock, you've got the broken up rock being prepared, you've got the alteration and oxidization that's suggesting this is a big, powerful system, and then you've got it in the drill holes where you've got good distribution of gold, not just in like skinny little pieces. You've got the distribution in a good chunk of that drill core.
Yeah, and I'd encourage your readers just to look at our press releases for the last few holes we put out. We've tried to put photographs of that drill core showing the sample to sample intervals in there, and you can see the consistency of gold.
I looked at it. Yeah.
And so that's encouraging. So it opens up the potential for a bulk mineable system, whether it's open, whether there might be some open pit component, there may be. But you could still look at these kind of wide widths, open up the potential for bulk mineable underground techniques as well. So,
wow, it's a heck of a project. Let me wrap it up, Robert, and we'll have a chat on the other end.
Okay.
So there you go, folks. I'm sure glad I looked closely at this once I saw those drill results, because what really opened up my excitement about this project is I'm always looking for continuity of the high grade material. If you have little bits here and there, that's not what makes a mine. When you get that nice thick intersection of high grade and it's consistent throughout the hole and then hole to hole, and then you've got this indication of strike and depth potential, that's what makes up these big systems. And you know that there's already one, like Robert said, in close proximity. So they're looking in the right area. They're getting all the hallmarks of what you want to look for in one of these orogenic systems. And I think they've got a bright future. And I think that's realistic potential when Robert's talking about a multi-million ounce target. And then as an investor, you look at the valuation and, they only have a $38 million valuation. And you look at some of these systems that are being found in Newfoundland, those companies are having $100, $200, $500, $1 billion valuations. And it looks like these guys are onto something very similar. So I think they've got a lot of blue sky ahead of them. They got great infrastructure. They can drive right up to the project. It's probably only 2 hours from Vancouver, paved roads right to the project. So I'm very excited about what I hear about this company. And I think as investors, I always let people know my shows are for information purposes only. It's important for you to speak with your financial advisors and do your homework. Take a look at these cross sections and look at the distribution of gold, look at their corporate presentation, and you're going to learn a lot about what they have here. And I think they've got something very special. So on that note, have a great day, and we will talk to you soon.